Mike, what is the functional wrinkle, the on court fit storyline, whatever that you're most looking forward to see with not storyline, like
Yeah,
functional thing about Kevin Durant coming to the Suns that you can't wait to watch?
I have two. There's two things that I've been thinking about a lot, and one of them is the way that a lot of teams have sort of countered what the Suns can do with DeAndre and Chris Paul is putting size on Chris Paul. Like, for example, I'll talk about the Warriors, how the Warriors defend the Suns. The Warriors will put Draymond Green on Chris Paul. And the reason they put Draymond Green on Chris Paul is because if they have a pick and roll between uh, Chris Paul and DeAndre, and Draymond Green can effectively switch that pick and roll onto DeAndre, and then they have, if they want to worry about another big guarding Chris Paul, they can worry about that, but then they don't have to worry about DeAndre and burying someone under the rim and Chris Paul getting him the ball because Draymond Green's going to do a good job on him. I don't think you could do that against the Suns anymore. You have to put Draymond Green on Kevin Durant. And what that means, I think, even down the line for a lot of these teams, how many teams have guys that can guard all three of Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant and have like a good defender on all three of those guys? Normally, the guys that would be guarding Devin Booker will now be guarding Kevin Durant. That means Devin Booker will have the second best defender on each of those teams, and Chris Paul can no longer have size on him because the size needs to be on Kevin Durant. And just, I think, functionally, all the things that have been used to counter what the Suns do offensively, you can't do them anymore. I mean, Kevin Durant just breaks every scheme when it comes to that. And then the other thing I think is kind of interesting, people are very concerned about the defense for the Suns, I think maybe superficially sometimes, but I guess losing Mikal Bridges does bring some level of concerns, but I'm not sure how long it's been that if DeAndre Ayton plays the way that we know he's capable of playing, the way that he's played in the playoffs for the past 2 years, having somebody like Kevin Durant as a weak side shot blocker is not really something that the Suns have had with DeAndre Ayton. And, I think about Steven Adams and JJJ on Memphis, and I think the Suns can actually do some of the stuff they do defensively with DeAndre Ayton and Kevin Durant because you have another guy roaming around there, or even in some cases play DeAndre Ayton higher in some pick and roll coverage because they have another guy that can cover the rim now that's effective at the rim. And I think those kinds of things and the scheme things that you can do because Kevin Durant is this gigantic guy that can do everything on both sides of the floor. It just makes it so fascinating to think about how teams are going to counter it. It's just going to be really difficult for them.
Sam, do you have anything that you're particularly looking forward to that Mike didn't already talk about?
Yeah, no, I mean, Mike covered a lot. I'm really just to again underscore, I guess, the defensive side of the ball because I feel like that's where most of the concerns are coming from the outside right now. But on the other hand, I don't think a lot of people seem to realize that the Suns have been a top 10 defensive rating team. They've been a better defensive team technically by the stats than they've been an offensive team this season, and that's largely on the backs of, as good as Mikal Bridges and to an extent Cam Johnson are, it's been largely on the backs of a lot of their backups, a lot of their bench guys. Josh Okogie, who we already talked about, Bismack Biyombo and Jock Landale holding it down low. One guy whose development I'm really excited for over the past 20 games, at least to watch how the narrative develops, is Devin Booker. As we talk about defense, I think we've come a really far way, a really long way with Devin Booker, and talking about him as no longer being, there was a time in his career, a very long time, where he was perceived as just a negative defensively. I think we're now kind of at the point where people understand he's been on what was a top 5 defensive team for a couple years in a row. He's not a negative. But I think we're approaching a point now with Mikal Bridges no longer being on the team. You don't want Devin Booker as your main point of attack defender necessarily, but I think there will be instances where the Suns will approach switch-heavy schemes, and he really will be embracing some of the toughest defensive assignments we've ever seen from him now that so much of his offense can be freed up, or so much of the pressure will be relieved by Kevin Durant. So, I mean, Mike already talked about how important Ayton is. He's going to be huge. KD is going to be huge. But I think we might see some great stuff from Book down the stretch, and I'm curious to see how kind of the masses react to that, or if it sits with them at all.
Yeah, the Suns defense has been shocking, especially when like some of their vitals aren't even great. Like to be bottom 10 in defensive rebounding, I think they're dead last in foul rate. I think the last time I looked, and still to be in the top 10 of points allowed per possession is incredible. And their ability to just like piecemeal together a bench amid like sort of the rotating injuries they have. And I think, you look at the names, they weren't necessarily super impressive to start. this season. Their depth has probably been like one of the underrated parts of their season. Also, as we all know, like they can put this doesn't devalue DeAndre Ayton, especially when we're talking about his playoff defense, but their ability just to like figure out the backup center situation with whoever. Bismack Biyombo has been statistically the best rim protector in the league.
Yeah.
So like there's just like their knack for just being able to do that is incredible.
And Jock's numbers are good too.